Maddie had always believed in true love. At 30 years old, she was living a dream. Or at least she thought she was. Married to Matthew, a handsome, charming, and attentive man, she felt lucky, despite the insecurities she had carried since her teenage years because of her body. One day, hoping to reignite the spark in their relationship, Maddie decided to surprise her husband at work. But what she found there shattered everything. Matthew was in the arms of another woman, and what she heard next was even worse. He was laughing loudly, saying he only married her because of the inheritance her father had left, that he couldn't stand that ugly fat woman anymore, and as soon as the money hit his account, he would file for divorce. Maddie's world collapsed. But amid the tears and humiliation, something new was born. A silent promise. She swore he would pay dearly, and she would do it in the most painful way possible. Maddie had always been one of those girls who went unnoticed in the school hallways. Chubby since childhood, she grew up hearing cruel jokes and carrying the invisible scars of a world that values appearance more than essence. While other girls received love notes and dance invitations, Maddie learned to hide her tears and smile even when it hurt. Her mother, a sweet and strong woman, always said, "You're beautiful just the way you are. The world just hasn't learned how to see with its heart yet." Those words kept her going on the hardest days, but the pain was still there. Despite everything, Maddie never let bitterness take over. She grew up, studied hard, and with effort and dedication opened her own flower shop. A magical little space where she felt alive, surrounded by the colors and scents of flowers, which, to her, were like people, each one with its own unique beauty. Maddie was a romantic, a dreamer, the kind who still believed in happy endings. She loved listening to her customers' love stories, and even though she hadn't lived one herself, she had faith that her time would come. Her life was quiet and simple. Her parents, though not wealthy, had always been hard-working and managed to save a decent amount over the years. When Maddie's father passed away suddenly from a heart attack, her world collapsed. She had been very close to him. As a form of comfort, she found out he had left her an inheritance of $350,000. It was a significant amount, but to Maddie it could never fill the void of losing him. Through tears, she mentioned the inheritance to a few close customers, saying she would give it all just to hug her father one more time. It was on a rainy afternoon, among lilies and sunflowers, that Matthew first appeared. He walked into the flower shop soaking wet, looking for flowers for his grandmother's grave. He was tall, handsome, with an easy smile and eyes that seemed to pierce through the soul. Maddie felt her heart race, something that rarely happened. They started talking, and to her surprise, Matthew was kind, attentive, and seemed genuinely sensitive as he spoke about the recent loss of his grandmother. When Maddie mentioned she had also lost her father, his eyes lit up with a seemingly sincere empathy. Always talkative, Maddie let the story of the inheritance slip. "It's not much, but it's what he was able to leave for me. About $350,000. But that doesn't matter. I'd give it all just to hug my father one more time," she said, eyes misty. Matthew gently touched her hand and said, "Your father must have been an incredible man, and he would surely be very proud of you." Maddie's heart melted at that moment. It was the first time someone so handsome and charming had treated her with such tenderness. What she didn't know was that for Matthew, that conversation meant something very different. He came from a hard life. He never starved, but money had always been tight. He grew up knowing his good looks were an asset and used them to get favors, jobs, even small luxuries. When he heard about the inheritance, a light switched on in his mind. That sweet woman, in love with flowers and clearly lonely, could be his ticket. Matthew started showing up more often, sometimes to buy flowers, sometimes just to chat. He'd bring her coffee, give her subtle compliments, and ask about her day with what seemed like genuine interest. And Maddie, with her wounded and longing heart, let herself be swept away. They began exchanging messages, meeting outside the shop. Maddie felt like she was walking on clouds. It was as if all those years of rejection and pain had been worth it just for this moment. In just 2 months, they were officially married. Matthew said he didn't like big ceremonies, that true love didn't need parties or luxury. Maddie agreed, enchanted by his simple view of life. They got married at the courthouse, with no guests, no fuss. She left her house and moved in with him to a modest home full of promises. To Maddie, it felt like the beginning of a new life. At first, everything seemed perfect. Matthew was affectionate, slept holding her close, complimented her flowers, said she was the most special woman he had ever met. But as the days went by, something began to change. The hugs became rare, the sweet messages scarce. Matthew started working late at the accounting office where he'd gotten a job shortly before the wedding. When he came home, he barely spoke. He said he was tired, stressed, and always avoided physical contact. Maddie tried to understand. She cooked special dinners, left little notes, asked if something was wrong, but Matthew always brushed it off. "Everything's fine, love. Just a lot of work." 6 months went by. Maddie felt more and more invisible in her own home. The woman who once smiled among roses and orchids now cried alone in the bedroom. Then she decided to do something different. She remembered the days when Matthew seemed so enchanted by her and thought maybe a surprise would reignite that spark. She decided to visit Matthew at the office at the end of the day, bringing a bouquet of flowers and a heart full of hope. She entered the building with sweaty palms and a racing heart. She climbed the stairs smiling, imagining his reaction upon seeing her. But as she approached the office where he worked, she heard voices. And then her world crumbled. Matthew was inside, hugging a blonde, elegant woman who was clearly close to him. The door was slightly open. Maddie froze. "She has no idea," Matthew said, laughing. "I'm only married that fat cow for her father's inheritance. That $350,000 will be mine soon. I'm just waiting for the paperwork to clear. After that, goodbye. I can't stand looking at her anymore." The woman, Kelly, threw her head back and laughed. "You're terrible, Matthew," she said between giggles. "Terrible? Me? I'm just doing what anyone would do. I deserve a better life. And her? She should be thanking me for making her feel loved." Maddie felt her heart ripped from her chest. She stood there, frozen, listening to everything, unable to breathe. Her eyes filled with tears, her soul filled with shame, pain, rage. But in the middle of that darkness, a spark began to ignite. Yes, it was pain that burned, but it was also a fury that grew. And right there, in that cold and lonely hallway, Maddie made a vow to herself. He would pay for every word, every lie, every humiliation. She didn't know how yet, but one thing was certain. Her revenge was just beginning. The days following the discovery were the most painful of Maddie's life. She could barely eat, sleep, or even look at herself in the mirror. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the image of Matthew laughing with his mistress, calling her a fat, ugly woman, saying he was only with her because of the money. Those words echoed in her mind like a cruel sentence. The woman who had given herself completely to that man now felt like everything had been a lie. But something inside her began to change. At first, there was only pain. Then came anger, and from that anger, a decision was born. She would no longer be the victim of this story. If Matthew thought he could destroy her and walk away unpunished, he was very wrong. Maddie was going to rebuild herself, not just to show him what he had lost, but to rediscover herself, a version of her that he would never know, and that would never again be humiliated. It was during this phase of total darkness that a childhood friend re-entered her life, Becca. They had lost contact years ago, but through one of life's strange coincidences, they reunited when Maddie, in tears, visited the aesthetic therapy clinic where Becca worked as a nutritionist. Seeing the state her friend was in, Becca hugged her tightly and silently vowed to help Maddie rise from the ashes.
With Becca's support, Maddie began a complete transformation, physical, emotional, and psychological. But it wouldn't happen with just diet and exercise. Becca had a cousin, Mark, a renowned plastic surgeon who specialized in aesthetic rehabilitation for trauma victims. When he heard Maddie's story, he was deeply moved, and, discreetly, he decided to help her. The transformation began with the invisible details: emotional reprogramming, rebuilding self-esteem, and recovering the identity Maddie had buried long ago in order to please others, including her husband. Then came the procedures. Mark carefully redesigned each feature of her face, giving her an entirely new appearance. Her cheeks were subtly slimmed, her nose restructured, her eyes gently lifted, her lips reshaped. It was the same gaze, but now with a power no one would dare to underestimate. Next came the body surgeries: liposuction, arm and thigh lifts, abdominal contouring. Everything was done with safety, patience, and care. Maddie had the resources, inherited from her father, and used every cent not out of vanity, but out of justice. She wanted her body to reflect the strong and worthy woman she had always been on the inside. She wanted to look in the mirror and see someone Matthew wouldn't even recognize. During the months of recovery, she isolated herself from everything and everyone. She didn't answer calls, didn't reply to messages, only spoke with her mother, assuring her that she was okay, but needed time alone. As far as Matthew knew, she had gone to take care of a distant aunt. Not that he really cared. It was as if she had disappeared, and in a way, she had. The old Maddie had died, and in her place, a new woman was being born. More beautiful, stronger, smarter, more strategic. Over time, in addition to the surgeries, Maddie began training with personal trainers, taking classes in posture, public speaking, and etiquette. She learned to dress with elegance, to walk with confidence, to speak with clarity and purpose. Her voice, once timid, now carried tone and rhythm. She studied books on human psychology, body language, and emotional manipulation. She was preparing not just for revenge, but to win. Becca accompanied her through everything, deeply moved by how much her friend was growing. And Mark, the surgeon, who at first saw Maddie only as a patient, began to admire her as a woman. They developed a sincere friendship, marked by respect, care, and mutual admiration. But Maddie, despite the affection she felt, wouldn't allow anything to distract her from her goal. She wanted justice. And she wouldn't rest until she exposed Matthew in the most painful way possible. When 1 year had passed since she caught Matthew with his mistress, Maddie was unrecognizable. Anyone who saw her now would never imagine that this elegant, confident woman with a piercing gaze and commanding presence had once been called a fat, ugly woman by a mediocre man. She had become everything Matthew desired, and now he would never have it. And that's when she decided it was time to return, subtly, strategically, with no rush, like a lioness lurking in the shadows before the strike. The first step of the plan? To reappear in the same social circles Matthew now frequented with his mistress. She knew he wouldn't recognize her right away, and that's exactly what she wanted. Maddie wanted to observe, to study, to control the board before making her move. She was back, but no one knew it yet, and the revenge was just beginning. It was a sultry Friday night, the kind where the city seemed to breathe anxiety through its alleys and glowing shop windows. The sky was clear, but the air felt heavy, as if foreshadowing an emotional storm no one could see coming. Scarlett, dressed in a provocative gown that accentuated the curves recently sculpted with scalpel and surgical precision, crossed the street toward the bar most frequented by men and women looking for nothing more than a flirtation. It was the first time Maddie had stepped foot there again, not as the humiliated, broken woman, but as Scarlett, refined, stunning, enigmatic. Her nose delicately slimmed, almond-shaped eyes enhanced with subtle lenses, sculpted cheeks, lips filled with perfect balance. No part of her face revealed the past, not even her gaze, once dull, now carried the fire of control. She sat at the bar with the elegance of someone born into wealth. She ordered an expensive red wine and slowly swirled the glass while observing the people around her, like a hunter disguised as prey. She knew Matthew would be there. It had been his favorite bar since the beginning of their relationship. And there he was. Matthew walked in with the same arrogant posture as always. His eyes scanned the room like a king surveying his territory, until they landed on her, on Scarlett. Something in the way she held the glass, or maybe the mysterious glint in her eyes, made him smile and walk toward her. "Do you come here often?" he asked with that practiced, charming smile so many women knew well. She turned her face to him slowly, as if she hadn't noticed his approach. "From time to time. Depends on the company," she replied in a velvety voice, carefully trained down to the last tone, a voice that no longer resembled Maddie's in the slightest. "Well, I hope the company is good tonight. I'm still deciding." He chuckled and pulled a chair beside her without asking, just like he always did with everything in life. "Matthew," he said, extending his hand. "Scarlett," she replied, shaking it firmly, hiding any inner tremor. At his touch, a flash of emotion surged through her. Years of pain, humiliation, and abandonment concentrated in that simple contact. But Scarlett kept her gaze steady and smiled. They talked for long minutes. Matthew, enchanted by Scarlett's mystery and intelligence, began to flirt without restraint. She, with sharp replies and surgical emotional control, guided the conversation like an invisible maestro. Every word was calculated, every smile precisely measured. That's when Kelly walked in. High heels, heavy makeup, a tight dress clinging to the body she believed irresistible. The mistress Matthew once hid from his wife with lame excuses appeared at the bar like a ghost from Maddie's past. She approached the pair with the confidence of someone who thought herself irreplaceable. "Hey, babe," she said, placing a hand on Matthew's shoulder. He flinched slightly as if his perfect night had just been interrupted. "Kelly, hey, I didn't know you were coming tonight," he replied, trying to sound casual, but the discomfort was obvious. Kelly shot Scarlett a sharp glance, sizing her up as a threat. "And who is she?" Before he could answer, Scarlett smiled. "Just a woman who enjoys good conversation." She crossed her legs with grace. Kelly frowned. "Can we talk in private?" she said, tugging Matthew by the arm. He looked at Scarlett, then at Kelly, and in an unexpected move, he pulled his arm away firmly. "Not now. I'm busy." Kelly was stunned. "You're brushing me off? For her? A total stranger?" "Kelly, please, go home. We'll talk later." Unable to hide her fury, Kelly turned on her heels and stormed out, leaving behind a trail of cheap perfume and resentment. Scarlett raised her glass, as if to toast a first victory. "That was, bold," she said, feigning surprise. "It wasn't anything serious, and you're different. There's something about you that intrigues me." She let out a soft laugh, as if that statement were the most ordinary thing in the world. "Maybe you're just curious about what you can't control."
Matthew remained silent for a few seconds. It was as if Scarlett had hypnotized him, and he wanted more, much more. But not even in his wildest dreams would he have suspected that the woman standing in front of him was the same one he had once crushed without mercy, the woman he once called his wife, and later discarded like trash. They kept talking until the bar began to empty.
Matthew, increasingly captivated, offered to take her home. Scarlett declined, with elegance. "Not so fast, Matthew. Mystery is half the beauty." He was fascinated. "Can I at least have your number?" She smiled. "I'll see you here next week, same time." And then she walked away, leaving behind her sophisticated perfume and the taste of doubt in the air. Outside, Scarlett took a deep breath. Her heart was still racing, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She had done it. He hadn't recognized her, and most importantly, he wanted her. The trap was set. The humiliated, betrayed, rejected girl was now a seductive ghost, a wolf disguised as desire. And Matthew, he had no idea he was dancing with his own downfall.
Since that night at the bar, Matthew hadn't been able to get Scarlett out of his head. It was as if an old flame had been reignited, but he had no idea he was playing with his own past, with a woman he himself had helped destroy. Maddie, now Scarlett, played her game carefully. She had to take it slow. One wrong move and everything would collapse, but she was more prepared than ever. Every word she spoke was deliberate, every smile precisely calculated. Each encounter with Matthew was like placing another piece on a chessboard she knew she would one day win. Matthew, on his end, was captivated. Scarlett was mysterious, elegant, stunning, and at the same time there was something about her that made him feel at ease. It was as if he already knew her, as if she touched a part of him that no other woman ever had. But not even in his wildest dreams could he imagine that this woman was Maddie, the one he had humiliated, betrayed, and tossed aside like garbage. They began texting each other every day, long conversations that lasted into the early morning hours. Matthew shared secrets, talked about his job, his desires, even his fears, things he had never shared with any other woman. Scarlett listened in silence, a storm of fury and compassion brewing inside her. It was terrifying to realize how capable he was of showing vulnerability now, after everything. She remembered the pain in the eyes of the old Maddie, the girl who used to fall asleep crying, wondering what she had done wrong. And now that pain had become fuel. Mark, the plastic surgeon and loyal friend, remained her anchor. He helped her remember who she truly was, beneath the new face, the trained confidence, the flawless makeup. "You're not just beautiful, Maddie. You're powerful," he would say, looking into her eyes with a tenderness that warmed even the coldest parts of her heart. And Maddie was starting to believe it. For the first time in her life, she felt in control. She held in her hands the man who had once destroyed her, and now he was in love with her, completely taken. Not a day went by without a message. He called just to hear her voice. He planned romantic dates. Maddie began saving everything, every message, every voice note, every confession. It was like building her own courtroom. There was no rush. She wanted his fall to be loud, unforgettable. Then one day, Matthew sent a message she didn't expect. "You know, Scarlett, there's something about you that scares me. Like you know me better than I know myself. I've never felt this way before." She held the phone, trembling inside. For a moment, she almost felt sorry for him. But then she remembered the night she found him with Kelly, the mocking laughter, the cold words he used when he said she was just a phase. She remembered every tear, every day she couldn't eat, every glance in the mirror she avoided. And now, that pain had become fuel. She replied simply, "Maybe I do." In the following meetings, Maddie began to push boundaries. She asked about his past, about his exes, about how he treated women. And Matthew, enchanted and overconfident, spoke openly, as if proud of his stories. He talked about his wife Maddie with disdain,
as if she had been some weak, naive fool, unfit for his world. He said they were going through a separation and that soon he'd be free for Scarlett. Little did he know that every word was a bullet to his own reputation.
Maddie recorded everything. Mark, though concerned about the emotional risks of her revenge, continued to support her. He still saw the same pain in her eyes from the beginning, but now it was wrapped in strength, and he knew she needed to see it through. She needed to end the story that had consumed her for so long. One night, Scarlett was invited by Matthew to a company party, an important event filled with influential people. It was the perfect opportunity. She arrived stunning. An elegant dress, flawless makeup, and a discreet necklace that concealed a hidden camera. She was the same woman he had once discarded, but now unrecognizable. Matthew introduced her as his new muse. All eyes at the party turned to her in admiration. No one could have imagined that beneath that sophisticated appearance was a soul marked by deep scars and a revenge about to erupt. During the event, Matthew gave a speech about integrity, about values, about respecting women, and Scarlett smiled. Inside her, a storm roared. At the end of his speech, Matthew invited Scarlett onto the stage and said, "This woman has shown me that truth still exists in the world. She's the light I've waited for all this time." Scarlett looked him in the eyes. The world seemed to slow down. Then she took the microphone. The room fell silent. Scarlett took a deep breath and began. "You know what's funny, Matthew? I've also waited a long time for this moment." Matthew laughed, confused. She continued. "I waited years to look you in the eye and tell you that I'm not who you think I am. My name isn't Scarlett. It never was. My name is Maddie. Yes, that Maddie. The one you destroyed. The one you ridiculed, cheated on, humiliated. The one you called insignificant." Silence turned to shock. Matthew turned pale. Scarlett, or rather Maddie, removed the necklace and revealed the hidden camera. "And now, everyone here is going to see who you really are." She triggered the screen behind her. A perfectly edited video began to play. Audio clips, screenshots, snippets of conversations where Matthew revealed his true self, speaking with disdain for women, mocking Maddie, bragging about his infidelities. People began to stand. Murmurs filled the room. Shocked glances. Phones recording. Kelly, the mistress, was there and laughed loudly at Matthew's humiliation. Co-workers left the room. Executives turned off their phones. Matthew was ruined. But Scarlett wasn't done. "You taught me a painful lesson, Matthew. You taught me never to beg for love again. And as cruel as it was, today I thank you, because thanks to you, I became who I am." With tear-filled eyes, but unwavering posture, Maddie stepped down from the stage to a wave of hesitant applause that quickly grew. On her way out, she passed Matthew, who trembled in silence, speechless. She whispered, "This isn't revenge. This is justice." And she walked away. Mark was waiting outside. Without saying a word, he pulled her into a tight embrace. That night, Maddie slept peacefully, for the first time after so much pain. And in that moment, she knew the past no longer defined her. She had faced it, and she had won. The public humiliation Matthew suffered that night was forever etched in memory. The video of Maddie's exposure went viral on social media, and he became the perfect example of a man who betrayed, manipulated, and belittled the woman he once claimed to love. No one wanted to hire him anymore. Everything began to collapse, and the women who once fell for his charm now avoided him with disdain. He was alone, stripped of the arrogance he once wore as armor. Meanwhile, Maddie felt a peace she had never imagined possible. The feeling of finally closing a painful chapter and leaving the shadow of her past behind was liberating.
But she knew that this victory wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of something much greater. Mark, always by her side, was more than a friend. He was a true safe harbor. With him, Maddie discovered that the transformation she needed wasn't just external, but deeply internal. The plastic surgeries and change in appearance were only the starting point of a journey towards self-knowledge and self-love. Together, they started attending support groups and lectures on self-esteem and women's empowerment. Mark, who had also been betrayed and heartbroken in the past, understood better than anyone the complexity of emotional healing. Little by little, what began as friendship grew into something deeper. It was a genuine love, built on respect, understanding, and companionship. A love that didn't depend on looks, money, or lies, but on the raw truth between two people who allowed themselves to truly see one another. Maddie began giving talks to women who, like her, believed that self-worth was tied to having a perfect body or other people's approval. In her speeches, she emphasized that true beauty comes from within, and no surgery could heal the wounds of the soul. Over time, her flower shop, which she had left in the care of her friend and business partner Clara, bloomed again, symbolizing her rebirth. What once was just a business turned into a gathering place for women seeking transformation, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual. She realized she no longer needed to hide her scars or the stories she carried. On the contrary, her vulnerability became her greatest strength. And despite all the pain she had endured, Maddie finally understood that she never needed to change so much to be worthy of love. That love had always lived within her. As for Matthew, he began to reflect on his mistakes. The public humiliation wasn't just a punishment, it was a mirror of his own failures. He learned that manipulating and belittling someone who loves you is a sure path to loneliness. And even with all the loss, the experience made him grow as a person, painfully, but genuinely. What started as a quest for revenge turned into a life lesson for everyone involved. Maddie, now stronger and more confident, was ready to live what she had always deserved: true love, a life with purpose, and the freedom to be fully herself.
Maddie was no longer the woman who once felt invisible, humiliated, and rejected. She had risen from the ashes, not just with a new body, but with a soul that was free, strong, and full of self-love. Her greatest triumph wasn't revenge, but redemption. The realization that she never had to change who she was to be worthy of respect and happiness. And to you who followed this story, remember, no one deserves to be belittled by someone they love. True power lies in recognizing your worth, loving yourself unconditionally, and fighting for what you truly deserve. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you reflect, leave a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And of course, don't forget to follow the channel for more real and emotional stories like this one. Here, the truth always wins, and your self-esteem is your greatest weapon. See you in the next video.